Earlier, Tupuria posted, I'm dealing with some personal problems, so I'm not gonna fight the first quarter. So the winner of Gaethje versus Paddy will be the interim title.
Here's what's happening right now that has the entire MMA world completely stunned. For the first time ever in UFC history, we might be about to watch an undefeated two-division champion lose everything without ever actually losing a fight. Dana White just made it official. Gaethje versus Pimblett goes down January 24th. And if Tupuria stays away, whoever wins that fight becomes the undisputed champion. But what's really driving Tupuria away from all of this, the truth behind this story, is going to blow your mind.
So over the past several weeks, I've made the difficult decision to temporarily step away from defending my title. This was not a decision I took lightly. However, when circumstances arise that threaten your personal integrity, your family, and your reputation, there comes a point when you must address them directly.
All right, so you need to dive deep into what might be the most shocking, most unexpected, and honestly heartbreaking situation the UFC has seen in ages. What kicked off as whispered speculation online back in October has now blown up into a complete disaster that could completely destroy the career of one of the most gifted, explosive, and promising fighters we've ever seen step into that octagon. We're talking about Ilia Tupuria here.
In recent months, I have been subjected to severe and unacceptable pressure, including threats to disseminate false allegations of domestic abuse unless financial demands were met. These allegations are entirely unfounded. The truth is not a matter of opinion, it is a matter of evidence. All relevant evidence has been carefully preserved and documented, including audio recordings, written communications, witness statements, and video material.
So let me break down exactly who this guy is for anyone not familiar with the Spanish-Georgian sensation. Born October 23rd, 1997, Tupuria showed up to the UFC back in 2020 as this relatively unknown fighter with a perfect record and this hunger you could feel through the screen. What happened next was absolutely incredible. He tore through the featherweight division with massive wins against guys like Ryan Hall, Jai Herbert, Bryce Mitchell, Josh Emmett, and then delivered what everyone called a star-making moment when he knocked out Alexander Volkanovski in February 2024 to grab that featherweight belt.
So that's heavy-duty stuff. Obviously, we knew that he was going through some personal issues, and there's rumors online, and I didn't want to partake in any of those. I had not heard any of this. I had not heard any of these allegations or rumors, innuendo, any of that. And so you can understand even more so why he would want to step away and not focus on fighting or defending his title, because obviously there's a lot going on.
But one championship wasn't enough for this guy. After successfully defending against the legendary Max Holloway in October 2024, Tupuria shocked everyone with his next move. February 19th, 2025, Dana White officially confirmed that Tupuria was giving up the featherweight title to chase bigger things at lightweight. This wasn't the UFC taking his belt away. This was Tupuria voluntarily walking away from his championship because he wanted something even more impressive.
This evidence has been submitted to appropriate judicial authorities in order to pursue legal action for attempted extortion, falsification of evidence, misappropriation of funds and personal property, and multiple threats. My initial decision to remain silent was made solely to protect my children, who are the most important part of my life. However, I've come to understand that silence under these circumstances does not protect the truth. It allows false narratives to take hold.
That's when things got really wild. Islam Makhachev, who had been absolutely crushing everyone as lightweight champion, announced he was vacating in May 2025 to chase the welterweight crown. This opened up exactly the opportunity Tupuria was hunting for. June 28, 2025. At UFC 317, Ilia Tupuria captured that lightweight championship in absolutely brutal fashion. The fight ended just 5-1 seconds into round 1. Tupuria unleashed his explosive striking, connected with a devastating right hook that dropped Charles Oliveira, then followed up with ground strikes that put the Brazilian completely out cold. Herb Dean waved it off, and boom, Ilia Tupuria joined the exclusive club of two division champions.
I think a lot of people were surprised that you were not fighting in the first quarter, at least. But how is it with the UFC? Are they understanding? Because obviously all the fighters can go through problems such as what you are going through. How understanding was Hunter and the other people involved? The truth is, Ilia says they have been excellent. We have a special connection. I have understanding without having to give a lot of explanation, understanding from them from the very first moment they have extended their hand. I have been offered their support in any time I needed it.
Just think about this for a second. Knockouts over Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, and Charles Oliveira. Guys like Matt Brown started comparing Tupuria's streak to John Jones's legacy, saying it might be one of the greatest 3-fight runs in MMA history. By August 2025, Tupuria hit #1 in the pound-for-pound rankings. This man had reached the absolute peak, 17-0, lightweight champion, and the entire MMA world was watching in amazement.
The story is that this made headlines for something that we were already told a couple of weeks ago, and there is no escalation from that, meaning Ilia Tupuria is not vanquishing or having stripped from him the title.
Then everything fell apart. The first signs appeared around October 6th and 7th, 2025. Fans started noticing that Tupuria and his wife, Georgina Bedell, had scrubbed all photos of each other from their Instagram profiles. In today's social media world, this kind of thing spreads like wildfire. Fans immediately started connecting dots about what was going down in the champion's private life. Memes exploded everywhere. Jokes started flying. But beneath all that internet noise, something way more serious was developing.
The UFC doesn't exactly have the greatest track record of giving a shit if you hit a woman or not. John Jones, heavyweight champion of the world, arrested for beating his fiance. Arrested for it. Not accused of, arrested for it. And he remained the champion until he retired.
November 2025 hit, and the rumors went nuclear. November 10th, Spanish media claimed Bedell had officially filed for divorce and was going after 50% of Tupuria's entire fortune. The situation was getting messier by the day, more public, and more worrying for anyone who actually cared about Tupuria's future. Then came the bombshell announcement that rocked the entire MMA world.
With Ilia, he carries himself like a champion. You know, he's done it. You know, he's done a good job marketing himself. He hasn't been trash like, you know, in terms of some other people that we've seen across, you know, over the last couple of years. He's done a good job. So I'm not going to sit here and just throw heat at him and throw shade at him. I think he's got a good chance of proving, if he seems convinced he can prove her wrong or prove the allegations to be incorrect, then good for him.
That statement from Ilia Tupuria dropped December 15th, 2025, and it exposed something nobody saw coming. The lightweight champion wasn't just dealing with some messy divorce drama. According to Tupuria himself, he was facing something much darker, an alleged extortion scheme.
And then he'll get back on track, and it's not going to be easy though. Like, people think like, oh, it's going to be done, it's going to swipe it underneath the rug. But the problem is though, is that there's time away from training, not just that, the mental game. He's not what he will be when he comes back, what he was when he left. Will he come back being the same guy? Probably not. It's going to take him time to get his mental back on track.
Look, I need to be crystal clear about something here. These are accusations. These are statements coming from Ilia Tupuria. We don't have access to all the facts. We don't know what proof exists from either side. What we absolutely know is that the current UFC lightweight champion has decided to walk away from fighting indefinitely to handle this mess, and like Ariel Helwani perfectly explained when he broke down this whole saga.
So, obviously you just saw Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett for the interim title. Earlier, Tupuria posted, I'm dealing with some personal problems, so I'm not gonna fight the first quarter. So the winner of Gaethje versus Paddy will be the interim title, and then they will face Tupuria.
The guy who everyone thought would be the future face of the UFC, the fighter who had achieved things most people only fantasize about, was now stepping back from the sport right at the absolute height of his success, and everyone wanted to know one thing: what happens next to the lightweight division, these extortion claims, and all the chaos that followed. To really grasp how serious Ilia Tupuria's allegations are, we need to dig into the details of his December 15th, 2025 statement and look at how people have reacted, because this situation has split the MMA community like almost nothing ever has.
You do wonder, at some point, will they decide to make that interim belt the actual belt if he's not going to come back anytime soon. I think I don't think that they're going to be forced to do that for the January event. We'll see what kind of timeline he's on, how long this is going to play out. But if it's by next summer, perhaps they make that call.
So let's unpack this step by step, because there's so much complexity here. Tupuria and Georgina Bedell got married back in 2020 and have 2 small kids together. Their daughter was born in 2021 and their son in 2023. This isn't some celebrity gossip story we're dealing with. This is a family being destroyed, with little children stuck in the middle of what looks like an incredibly bitter separation. Multiple sources and social media chatter connect the alleged extortion scheme to Tupuria's divorce proceedings. While Tupuria never explicitly names anyone in his public statement, the timing and circumstances make it pretty obvious who he's talking about. And the claims he's making are heavy: attempted extortion, faking evidence, stealing money. These aren't small-time accusations, but this is where everything gets messy, because not everyone in the MMA world is ready to take Tupuria's word for it.
The number 1 contender for his belt, Arman Tsarukyan, ends up not getting a shot at the belt, has to go out and do another fight, which officially gets named the number 1 contender's fight, of which Tsarukyan wins, but he is not fighting for the belt. Paddy the Baddy versus Justin Gaethje are going to go ahead and fight.
The loudest critic has been UFC featherweight Bryce Mitchell. December 15, 2025, right after Tupuria's statement went public, Mitchell dropped a brutal Instagram video directly calling Tupuria a domestic abuser, calling him a wife-beater, and completely dismissing the extortion story. Mitchell, who's famous for his controversial conservative opinions, held absolutely nothing back in his attack. Mitchell said that any man who puts his hands on a woman is straight-up trash, and called out Tupuria's brother too, saying he'd fight him and beat him down. He kept going with religious condemnation. Ilya, you need to repent. Return to Jesus Christ. You're gonna rot in hell, bro, because that's where women beaters go.
If we have the ability to get the belt off of Ilya without giving him a scratch, right? I mean, behind the scenes, you're giving him a bump anyway. Behind the scenes, you pulled him down in the rankings and put Islam, a guy who refused to fight him. You put a guy who refused to fight Ilya over Ilya. So you want a pound of flesh. It's very clear that you do. Just take the whole damn thing. Don't take a little version of his belt back. Take the entire belt back.
What's crucial to understand is that Mitchell is throwing these accusations around without any proof, without any criminal charges being filed, and without any legal system determining guilt. He's just assuming that whatever allegations exist against Tupuria must be true. This shows one of the most disturbing parts of situations like this. Public opinion decides guilt or innocence long before any real court gets to examine the actual evidence. Andrew Tate also jumped into the conversation, with his general relationship commentary getting tied to the Tupuria divorce by various media outlets. The combination of MMA drama and internet personalities created this perfect storm of speculation and hot takes. But through all this madness, some people have actually supported Tupuria during this rough time.
Ilya Tupuria's fighting career, it's done. And it's a shame to see it end this way. Everything going on right now outside of his fighting career, personal life, that's big things going on in this man's life. Why would he need to come back? He has all the money in the world, double champion, undefeated.
But what a career he's had if it is done. I mean, just knocked out Charles Oliveira and went up to 155. Finished Max Holloway. Finished Alexander Volkanovski. And what a rise he came on since fighting Bryce Mitchell back in 2021. I mean, what he has done and how he's ultimately changed the sport. But the weird thing about it is this not parallel to Conor McGregor?
Sean O'Malley in early December 2025 showed real understanding, saying, "I don't blame him at all. If he's going through divorce and relationship stuff, you got to figure out that personal stuff before you get into fight camp. Your mind needs to be ready, focused. It is not a time to be in fight camp." And the UFC itself, according to Tupuria, they've been completely supportive.
Wants to know, you announced not the first quarter that you'll fight in January. When would you like to fight? When you feel it's time to return? Well, Ilya says, as I've communicated, I'm going through some personal problems. I do not have an exact date when everything will be fixed. I hope that as soon as possible, as soon as it is solved, I will be ready to go back. In the octagon, I prioritize at this time the welfare of my family, of my children, my own. So as soon as everything is solved, I will be back to the octagon to give it the show that everyone deserves.
This matters a lot. because people have been wondering if the UFC would just strip Tupuria of his title and move forward. After all, they're running a business that revolves around promoting fights, and a champion who can't compete creates problems for the entire division. But at least right now, it looks like Dana White and UFC leadership are willing to give Tupuria whatever time he needs to work through his personal crisis. However, not everyone thinks that's the right approach. Chael Sonnen, the veteran analyst and former UFC fighter, has been especially vocal about what he thinks the UFC needs to do.
Just a very unfortunate situation for someone who, was on this meteoric rise, and will hopefully for him, if everything works out in his favor, be able to continue that rise. But obviously this is a huge obstacle on a personal level that he's going to have to overcome, and wish everyone involved the best, and hopefully it can be resolved.
But Sonnen has also insisted that this situation requires immediate action. December 16th, 2025, Sonnen argued on his podcast that the UFC has to strip Tupuria, saying, "You're not eligible to hold the title while dealing with non-injury issues." He went deeper, explaining that the moment Tupuria told everyone he was missing fights for anything outside of injury or illness criteria, that's automatic grounds for taking away his championship. Then there's the question of how they've handled similar situations before, because the UFC has dealt with domestic violence allegations in the past, and their history is complicated. This is a tough reality the MMA community has to face. Jon Jones got arrested for domestic violence and stayed champion. They signed Greg Hardy after he was found guilty and convicted of domestic violence. The UFC has historically stayed out of what their independent contractors do in their private lives. But no matter what happens with the legal stuff, there's one harsh truth Tupuria has to deal with. Time away from fighting takes its toll. This is just how professional fighting works. It's not only about physical training, it's about mental sharpness, about focus, about having your entire life organized so you can step into that cage and perform at the elite level. Right now, Ilia Tupuria is dealing with the kind of personal chaos that would destroy anyone. The future of the lightweight division. So here's where we stand today. The UFC lightweight champion is sidelined indefinitely. The division is stuck in limbo, and Dana White has a major problem that needs fixing. Enter UFC 3T4 and the fight that might change everything. November 27th, 2025, during a surprise Thanksgiving announcement during the NFL game between the Kansas City Chiefs and Dallas Cowboys, Dana White made a statement that set the entire MMA world on fire. Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett for the interim UFC lightweight championship, set for January 24th, 2026 at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. This fight headlines UFC 34 and marks the promotion's first show on Paramount+. On the surface, this looks pretty straightforward. Create an interim belt while the champion handles his personal business, then have the winner fight Tupuria for unification down the road. Easy, right? But here's where things get fascinating and potentially very messy. Paddy Pimblett has publicly hinted that Tupuria might need to give up the title if he's gone until summer 2026 to keep the division moving, and he's not the only one thinking that way. Sources suggest Tupuria is actually considering vacating the lightweight title, which would match UFC history, where champions like Conor McGregor got stripped for being inactive too long. Just consider this for a moment. Conor McGregor lost his featherweight title in November 2016 after 11 months away, then lost his lightweight title in April 2018 after almost 18 months without defending. Tupuria's current 6 months off since his June 2025 victory isn't at stripping levels yet, but if this stretches into spring or summer 2026, we're looking at 12 to 14 months of inactivity. Ariel Helwani asked the question everyone's wondering about. So what if Gaethje versus Pimblett gets upgraded from an interim title fight to an undisputed championship match? Let's examine what's on the line for both fighters. Justin Gaethje, now 37 years old with a record of 26-5, has openly called this fight his last shot at capturing undisputed UFC gold. In interviews on December 15th and 16th, 2025, he said he'd be crazy to think this is the start of his career. This is his final chance, and the opportunity to end his career the way he wants is everything he could hope for. This isn't just another bout for Gaethje. This is his legacy. This is everything he's been building toward over a decade-plus career in mixed martial arts. This guy has saved UFC cards multiple times. He's won 3 of his last 4 fights, and he's looking to ride off into the sunset with championship gold wrapped around his waist. On the flip side, Pimblett 23-3 overall, and a perfect 7-0 in the UFC, has boldly predicted a knockout finish. Everyone's going to be shocked, because I think I'm going to knock him out. People won't expect that. I don't see him getting past the third round. Pimblett has mentally claimed the belt as the real championship, especially with all the Tupuria speculation. He stated, "When I win the belt, I'm the champion now. I'm still going to be a world champion once I beat Gaethje and lift that interim belt." The confidence from Pimblett is impossible to ignore, and if Tupuria's situation keeps getting worse, if the legal fights drag on, if the timeline stretches indefinitely, then Pimblett could be absolutely right. He might become the undisputed champion without ever having to face Ilia Tupuria. But there's another fighter we can't forget about who's been waiting patiently for his shot, Arman Tsarukyan. He's volunteered as the official backup for UFC 324, planning to be in Las Vegas, ready to jump in on short notice. The #1 contender who has done everything the UFC asked finds himself watching from the sidelines while Gaethje and Pimblett battle for the title. The lightweight division is complete chaos right now, and Chael Sonnen doesn't hold back about what he thinks needs to happen. Those are strong words from Sonnen, and they reflect what more and more people in the MMA community are feeling. The logic is simple. You can't freeze an entire division forever. Other fighters have careers, other fighters have families, other fighters deserve their chances, and while everyone feels bad for what Tupuria is going through at some point, the business has to keep rolling. Now I want to wrap this up with some perspective, because there are people who think Ilia Tupuria's fighting career might already be finished. That's the comparison that keeps getting brought up. Conor McGregor, another two-division champion, who walked away from the sport surrounded by personal drama and legal troubles. Another once-in-a-generation talent whose career got destroyed by stuff happening outside the octagon. The similarities are impossible to ignore, but Tupuria isn't gone for good yet. He told ESPN Deportes that he hopes to come back as soon as possible, putting his family's safety first while expressing hope that he'll be ready to return to the octagon once everything gets sorted out. There's still a possibility, however small, that Tupuria can clear his name, resolve his legal problems, and come back to defend his championship. So we're all waiting. We're waiting to see what happens with the legal cases. We're waiting to see if the UFC decides to strip Tupuria or let him keep his belt. We're waiting to see who wins between Gaethje and Pimblett on January, and we're waiting to see if Ilia Tupuria, one of the most gifted fighters we've ever watched, will ever compete inside the octagon again. UFC 324 is being promoted as a massive championship doubleheader, featuring not only the lightweight interim title fight, but also Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes for the women's bantamweight championship. It's going to be an amazing night of fights, but the absence of Ilia Tupuria will cast a shadow over everything. Because here's what nobody wants to admit out loud. If Tupuria doesn't return, we're watching the end of what could have been one of the greatest careers in UFC history. 17 wins, 0 losses, 13 finishes, knockouts over 3 of the best fighters in the world. All of it potentially destroyed, not by an opponent inside the cage, but by the chaos of life outside of it, like Ariel Helwani perfectly summarized. The lightweight division keeps moving forward. UFC 324 is almost here. Gaethje and Pimblett are prepared to fight for gold, and the big question remains, will Ilia Tupuria ever come back to reclaim what belongs to him? We'll just have to wait and see. Click on one of the videos on your screen to watch more content like this.